Tanay and a Professor Ning, Batam Yakirta, Amarinia Bazu Alaucum. My name is Steve Delamarter, and I am one of the sons of Getatchew, one of his other and lesser known children. I showed up on his doorstep in Collegeville, Minnesota in the bitter cold of winter 2005. I had been to Israel and to Ethiopia for the first time in 2004. To my surprise, when I returned home, I began to find Ethiopian manuscripts in North America in the hands of dealers and private owners, in museums and universities. And I began to realize that these manuscripts were unknown and uncatalogued, even in the ones in the most prestigious institutions. The owners, especially the dealers, had allowed me to digitize the manuscripts, but now I had a problem. Where should these images go? And how could I create good information about the books so that scholars could know what was in them? This is why I showed up on his doorstep in 2005. I came to talk with Getatchew about these manuscripts, the images I had made, and how to catalog them. I didn't know anything. Those who know me well will tell you that ignorance and I are close companions. If you're ignorant, you look for a teacher. So I set off to Collegeville. I arrived late in the day and Getatchew was already gone home, but I found his study carrel. To me, his space was as impressive as the Louvre and as sacred as the Timkat pool in Gondar. As I looked over the wall around his cubicle, I was looking over into the promised land. The next day we talked, and he told me he would help me. My adoption had begun. Year after year, I traveled to Collegeville from my home in Portland, Oregon. Often, I came 2 or 3 times a year. On my first trip to Ethiopia in 2004, I became friends with Ato Demeke Berhane, head of the manuscript archives at the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. I met Daniel Alemu in Jerusalem, a member of the Ethiopian community there, and took him with me to Ethiopia as a translator. Father Columba and I worked together to bring both of them to Collegeville for a time to learn from Getatchew and to be together in the beautiful surroundings of Collegeville. One of my students, Roger Rundell, worked with me for several years as a research assistant, and he was able to come and learn as well. Soon, there were 3 more sons of Getatchew. Each of those trips offered times that were rich with learning and draped with the hospitality of the HMML community and Professor Getatchew and Miss Rack. The next year, I met Getatchew in Trondheim, Norway, at the International Conference of Ethiopian Studies. He connected me with new colleagues and friends from Europe and Israel. He introduced me to Dr. Veronica Six from Hamburg, Germany, and suggested that I ask her to catalog magic scrolls for volume 2 of our catalogs, which she did. He came to the session where I gave a presentation and where Daniel Alemu was also giving a presentation. The woman in the pictures with us is Kristen Stoffergen Pedersen, known to many as Sister Abraham. Getatchew had helped her with her research on the Ethiopian Psalter, and she is the one who introduced Daniel Alemu and me in Jerusalem. Under the canopy of Getatchew's affirmation and encouragement, many of us, his sons and daughters, came together. In December of 2007, I came alone to HMML, and we worked together on the new batch of almost 100 manuscripts that I had located and digitized. I learned a huge amount in those sessions. We would set up a room and project images onto the wall. He would describe the manuscripts and I would take notes. I also recorded the sessions, and I have hours of recordings of our time together. As I listened to them again this week, I was overwhelmed at the patience he showed me hour after hour. In one such session, we discovered Emperor Menelek's personal psalter among the Weiner manuscripts, and we made a plan to return that psalter to Ankabar. Clear back in 2005, Getatchew pledged to help me catalog all the manuscripts I might locate and digitize. But when we surpassed 300, I knew that it was not fair to hold him to that promise. So the next year, Kisis Malaku Terefe from Los Angeles became our new cataloger, and we arrived together on his doorstep in Collegeville to learn from Getatchew. Jeremy Brown had become my new research assistant, and he was able to come to Collegeville too. Two more sons of Getatchew were adopted into the family as we took training and lounged together at his lakeside home. A couple years later, in August of 2012, Kurt Nickham and I were starting up a project on the textual history of the Ethiopic Old Testament. Several of us came to HMML to talk with Getatchew and with one another about how we would proceed. Getatchew would meet us each morning for breakfast in the monastery guest house. We looked together at manuscripts, and he gave us great advice. Doctors Nickham and Butts are two of the very finest scholars of Ethiopian studies in North America. And though they were well on the way to becoming themselves tenured professors, they consider themselves Getatchew's students and sons. In July of 2013, when they held a conference at HMML, those of us who had worked with Getatchew had to bring our newest friends and colleagues to meet him and to learn from him. My dear friend Gary Jost was just entering the world of Ethiopian studies. Other young scholars from around the world, these here are from Ethiopia, Germany, and France. They came to honor Getatchew, to hear him speak, and to learn from him. One of my great joys was to work with Getatchew on the St. Catherine's palimpsest project. We worked on the manuscript known as Greek New Find 90, which has a Greek overtext but Ethiopic undertext on several of its folios. Getatchew and I worked in Zoom for many hours across several weeks. He was in New York City, and I was in Portland, Oregon. Last year, Wendy Belcher of Princeton hosted Getatchew in a conference on the miracles of Mary. I had the privilege of operating the Zoom room to help make it happen. So many luminaries from all over the world came to the meeting and to hear him talk. It is amazing to me all of the lives that Getatchew influenced for good. He taught us to love Ethiopia, her people, her history, and her place in history. He and Misrak have taught us to know generosity in its various expressions, in welcome, in giving, in patience, and in forgiveness. In all things, he taught us. In all things, he inspired us. None more than me. I loved him as a father.